I just had to let you know you're.
Baik, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Perkenalkan, nama saya Aulia Sagita Ananda. Saya dari kelas 336A 07 dengan NIM 33230074. Saat ini saya akan mempresentasikan sebuah video yang berjudul Cara Mewujudkan Tujuan Anda yang Paling Ambisius by Steven Dunier IDX Tucson. Di sini video berbasis bahasa Inggris, jadi saya akan menginterpretikan atau mentranslate apa yang dibicarakan oleh Steven dari awal video sampai akhir video tersebut. Yang pertama kita akan mendengarkan di pembukaannya dari menit ke 00 awal sampai ke 145 dulu. Baik, kita mulai.
By show of hands, how many of you believe you could replicate this image of Brad Pitt with just a pencil and piece of paper? Well, I'm going to show you how to do this. And in so doing, I'm going to give you the skill necessary to become a world-class artist. And it shouldn't take more than about 15 seconds. But before I do that, how many of you believe you could replicate this image of a solid gray square? Every one of us. And if you can make one gray square, you can make 2, 3, 9. Truth of the matter.
Baik, saya pause dulu videonya. Saya akan membahas di sini. Steven sang pembicara bertanya kepada penonton, siapa yang bisa menggambar wajah Brad Pitt hanya dengan pensil dan kertas? Sangat sedikit yang yakin. Lalu di menit ke-28 dia kemudian bertanya, siapa yang bisa menggambar satu kotak abu-abu polos? Semua orang yakin bisa. Selanjutnya di menit ke-43, Steven menjelaskan, jika Anda bisa membuat satu kotak abu-abu, Anda bisa membuat ratusan kotak abu-abu lainnya hingga membentuk gambar Brad Pitt utuh, seperti teknik pixel. Lanjut di 104.
Is if you could make just one gray square, it'd be very difficult to argue that you couldn't make every gray square necessary to replicate the image in its entirety. And there you have it. I've just given you the skill necessary to become a world-class artist. I know what you're thinking. That's not real art. Certainly wouldn't make me a world-class artist. So let me introduce you to Chuck Close. So one of the highest earning artists in the entire world for.
Baik, saya lanjutkan. Di menit ke-104 ini, dia memperkenalkan seorang yang bernama Chuck Close, salah satu seniman termahal di dunia yang menggunakan teknik kotak kecil ini untuk membuat sebuah mahakarya. Kita lanjutkan.
Decades, and he creates his art using this exact technique. You see, what stands between us and achieving even our most ambitious dreams has far less to do with possessing some magical skill or talent, and far more to do with how we approach problems and make decisions to solve them. And because of the continuous and compounding nature of all those millions of decisions that we face on a regular basis, even a marginal improvement in our process can have a huge impact on our end results. And I'll prove this to you by taking a look at the career of Novak Djokovic. Back in 2004, when he first became a professional tennis player, he was ranked 680th in the world. It wasn't until the end of his third year that he jumped up to be ranked third in the world. He went from making $250,000 a year to $5 million a year in prize money alone, and of course he did this by winning more matches. In 2011, he became the #1 ranked men's tennis player in the world, started earning an average of $14 million a year in prize money alone, and winning a dominating 90% of his matches. Now, here's what's really interesting about all of these very impressive statistics. Novak doesn't control any of them. What he does control are all the tiny little decisions that he needs to make correctly along the way in order to move the probability in favor of him achieving these types of results. And we can quantify and track his progress in this area by taking a look at the percentage of points that he wins. Because in tennis, the typical point involves 1 to maybe 3 decisions. I like to refer to this as his decision success rate. So back when he was winning about 49% of the matches he was playing, he was winning about 49% of the points he played. Then to jump up, become number 3 in the world, and actually earn $5 million a year for swinging a racket, he had to improve his decisions.
Baik, di sini saya lanjutkan. Di sini di menit ke-146, Steven menggunakan contoh petanis Novak Djokovic. Pada tahun 2004, Djokovic berada di peringkat 68 dunia, maaf. Saat naik ke peringkat 3, pendapatannya melonjak dari $250.000 menjadi $5 juta per tahun. Saat menjadi peringkat 1, dia memenangkan 90% pertandingan. Lalu di menit ke-225, menariknya, Djokovic tidak bisa mengontrol statistik kemenangan tersebut. Yang dia kontrol adalah keputusan-keputusan kecil di setiap poin. Lanjut ke menit 255, Steven menyebutnya decision success rate atau tingkat keberhasilan keputusan. Saat berada di peringkat bawah, Djokovic memenangkan 49% poin untuk naik ke peringkat 3 dunia. Dia hanya perlu menaikkan performa menjadi 52% poin. Dan untuk jadi nomor 1 di dunia, dia hanya perlu memenangkan 55% perubahan marginal kecil. Ini membawa dampak luar biasa. Mari kita lanjutkan.
Success rate to just 52%. Then to become not just number 1, but maybe one of the greatest players to ever play the game, he had to improve his decision success rate to just 55%. I keep using this word just. I don't want to imply this is easy to do. Clearly it's not. But the type of marginal improvements that I'm talking about are easily achievable by every single one of us in this room. And I'll show you what I mean. From kindergarten all the way through to my high school graduation, yes, that's high school graduation for me, every one of my report cards basically said the same thing. Steven's a very bright young boy. If only he would just settle down and focus. What they didn't realize was I wanted that even more than they wanted it for me. I just couldn't. And so from kindergarten straight through the second year of college, I was a really consistent C minus student. But then going into my junior year, I'd had enough. I thought, I want to make a change. I'm going to make a marginal adjustment. And I'm going to stop being a spectator in my decision-making and start becoming an active participant. And so that year, instead of pretending again that I would suddenly be able to settle down and focus on things for more than 5 or 10 minutes at a time, I decided to assume I wouldn't. And so if I wanted to achieve the type of outcome that I desired, doing well in school, I was going to actually have to change my approach. And so I made a marginal adjustment. If I would get an assignment, let's say read 5 chapters in a book, I wouldn't think of it as 5 chapters. I wouldn't even think of it as 1 chapter. I would break it down into these tasks that I could achieve that would require me to focus for just 5 or 10 minutes at a time. So maybe 3 or 4 paragraphs, that's it. I would do that. When I was done with those 5 or 10 minutes, I would get up. I'd go shoot some hoops, do a little drawing, maybe play video games for a few minutes. And then I'd come back. Not necessarily to the same assignment, not even necessarily to the same subject, but just to another task that required just 5 to 10 minutes of my attention. From that point forward, all the way through to graduation, I was a straight A student. Dean's List, President's Honor Roll every semester. I then went on to one of the top graduate programs in the world for finance and economics. Same approach, same results. So then I graduate, I start my career, and I'm thinking,
Baik, saya lanjutkan kembali. Di sini di menit 347 sejak TK hingga kuliah, Stephen adalah murid dengan nilai rata C karena dia menderita masalah fokus, tidak bisa fokus lebih dari 5 sampai 10 menit. Dilanjutkan ke menit 4:17. Saat masuk tahun ketiga kuliah, dia mengubah strateginya. Jika mendapat tugas membaca 5 bab buku, dia tidak melihatnya sebagai 5 bab, melainkan memecahnya menjadi tugas kecil yang hanya butuh fokus 5 sampai 10 menit. Misal, membaca 3 sampai 4 paragraf saja, lalu di menit ke 5:11, setelah 5 sampai 10 menit selesai, dia akan istirahat, main basket, menggambar, main game, lalu kemudian lagi untuk fokus 5 sampai 10 menit pada tugas lain. Strategi ini membuatnya fokus dengan predikat straight A atau nilai sempurna dan masuk program master keuangan terbaik dunia. Dilanjutkan sampai ke 5 menit 49, dia menerapkan metode memecah tugas besar ini ke dalam karir finansialnya hingga sukses. Menjadi trader derivatif eksotis atau kepala perdagangan falas di Bank of America, hingga mengelola hedge fund bernilai miliaran dolar. Kita lanjutkan.
it's worked really well for me. You know, you take these big concepts, these complex ideas, these big assignments, you break them down to much more manageable tasks. And then along the way, you make a marginal improvement to the process. You know, the odds of success in your favor. I'm going to try and do this in my career. So I did. I started out as an exotic derivatives trader at Credit Suisse. It then led me to be global head of currency option trading for Bank of America, global head of emerging markets for AIG International. It helped me deliver top-tier returns as a global macro hedge fund manager for 12 years and to become founder and CIO of 2 award-winning hedge funds. So it gets to 2001, and I'm thinking, this whole idea, it worked really well in school. It's been serving me well as a professional. Why aren't I applying this in my personal life? Like all those big ambitious goals I have for myself. So one day I'm walking to work, and at the time my commute was a walk from one end of Hyde Park to the other in London. It took me about 45 minutes each way. Hour and a half a day, 7.5 hours a week, 30 hours a month, 360 hours a year when I was awake, aware, basically wasting time, listening to music on my iPod. So on my way home from work that day, I stopped at the store. I picked up the first 33 CDs in the Pimsleur German language program, ripped them and put them onto my iPod. But I didn't stop there. Because the truth of the matter is, I'm an undisciplined person. And I knew that at some point, I'd switch away from the language and go back to the music. So I removed that temptation by removing all of the music. It left me with just one option: listen to the language tapes. So 10 months later, I'd listened to all 99 CDs in the German language program, listened to each one 3 times each. I then went to Berlin for a 16-day intensive German course. When I was done, I invited my wife and kids to meet me. We walked around the city. I spoke German to the Germans. They spoke German back to me. My kids were amazed. I mean, I couldn't close their jaws. But you and I, we know there's actually nothing amazing about what I just done. I made this marginal adjustment to my daily routine, this marginal adjustment to my process. Und jetzt, ich spreche ein bisschen Deutsch. And now I can speak some German. And so in that moment, I'm thinking, it's not supposed to be this easy for a guy like me, an old guy, to learn a new language. You're supposed to have to do that when you're a kid. And yet here I had done it, this marginal adjustment. So what other big, ambitious goals I've been holding on to, putting off until retirement, that I could potentially achieve?
Baik, saya pause sebentar. Saya akan membahas di sini. Di menit ke-6:37, Pada tahun 2001, dia menyadari metode ini belum dipakai untuk tujuan pribadinya. Dia dia menghitung waktu perjalanannya ke tempat kerja yang memakan waktu 45 menit sekali, jalan total 360 jam setahun, yang terbuang hanya untuk mendengarkan musik. Dia membeli, lalu dilanjutkan ke menit 7:17, dia membeli CD belajar bahasa Jerman, memasukkannya ke iPod, dan menghapus semua musik agar tidak tergoda. Sebulan kemudian, setelah konsisten mendengarkan saat berjalan kaki, dia bisa lancar berbicara bahasa Jerman saat berlibur ke Berlin bersama keluarganya. Lalu dilanjutkan ke 8:42. Berkat penyesuaian rutinitas kecil ini, dia mulai meraih mimpi-mimpi lainnya, mendapatkan lisensi mendapatkan lisensi balap, mobil, belajar menerbangkan helikopter, panjat tebing, terjun payung, dan terbang akrobatik.
I just made a marginal adjustment to my routine. So I started doing it. I earned my auto racing license. I learned how to fly a helicopter, did rock climbing, skydiving, and learned how to fly planes aerobatically. Well, if you're like me, back in 2007, you might have the same goal I had. I was just moving back from London. I was about 25 pounds overweight and out of shape.
Baik, kita mulai kembali video.
And I knew that going that route rarely results in the outcome you desire. So I decided to become an active participant. I thought about the habits and passions that I've developed over the course of my life. And I thought, can I make just a marginal adjustment to them so that they work in my favor as opposed to against me? And so I did. I've got this habit where I've been walking an hour and a half a day for the last 7 years. And I've got this passion for being in the outdoors. And so that year, I didn't actually set the New Year's resolution to lose 25 pounds. I set a resolution to hike all 33 trails in the front country of Santa Barbara's mountains. And I'd never been on a hike before in my life. But the truth of the matter is, it's not about the 33 trails. You have to break this big, ambitious goal down into these more manageable decisions, types of decisions that need to be made correctly along the way in order to improve the odds of achieving the type of outcome you desire. It's not about even one trail. It's about those tiny little decisions, like when you're sitting at your desk, putting in just a little extra time at the end of the day, or you're lying on your couch and you're clicking through the channels on your remote control or scrolling through your Facebook feed. And in that moment, make the decision to put it down. You go put on your hiking clothes. You go walk outside your front door and you shut it behind you. You walk to your car, you get in your car, and you drive to the trailhead. You get out of the car at the trailhead and you take 1 step. You take 2 steps, 3 steps. Every one of those steps that I've just described is a tiny little decision that needs to be made correctly along the way in order to achieve the ultimate outcome. Now, when I say I want to hike 33 trails in the front country, people think about the decisions at the top of the mountain. That's not what it's about. Because if you don't make the right decision when you're on the couch, there is no decision that occurs at the top of the mountain. So by the end of the year, I had hiked all 33 trails in the front country. I did them a couple of times each. I even did a few in the back country. I lost the 25 pounds, and I capped the year off by doing the hardest half marathon in the world, the Pier to Peak.
Baik, kita lanjutkan. Dari menit ke-95 tahun 2007, berat badannya berlebih 25 pon. Alih-alih mendaftar gym yang mungkin tidak akan dia datangi, dia membuat keputusan kecil. Dia memanfaatkan hobi jalannya untuk mendaki 33 jalur pegunungan Santa Barbara dalam setahun. Lanjut di menit ke-10:16, rahasianya bukan memikirkan puncak gunung, tapi keputusan kecil saat di sofa, menaruh remote atau HP, memakai baju olahraga, melangkah keluar pintu, dan masuk mobil. Langkah-langkah kecil itu menuntunnya menyelesaikan target tersebut dan berat badannya turun. Di menit ke-11.38, di tahun 2009, dia menargetkan membaca 50 buku setahun. Kuncinya bukan membaca satu buku secara langsung, tapi keputusan saat dia di sofa untuk membuka buku dan membaca satu kata. Jika bisa membaca satu kata, Anda akan membaca dua kata, satu kalimat, satu halaman, satu bab, hingga selesai puluhan buku. Kita lanjutkan kembali.
In 2009, I got really ambitious. Ambitious for a guy who still to this day cannot settle down and focus on anything for more than 5 or 10 minutes at a time, and that was to read 50 books. But again, it's not about reading 50 books. It's not even about reading one book. It's not about reading a chapter, a paragraph, a sentence. It's about that decision when you're sitting at your desk at the end of the day, or when you're lying on the couch or flicking through your Facebook feed and you put down the phone. You pick up a book and you read one word. If you read one word, you'll read 2 words, 3 words. You'll read a sentence, a paragraph, a page, a chapter, a book. You'll read 10 books, 30 books, 50 books. In 2012, I got really ambitious. I set 24 New Year's resolutions. 12 of them were what I call giving resolutions, where I did 12 charitable things that didn't involve writing a check. But it's not without its failures. I tried to donate blood and they rejected me because I'd lived in the UK. I tried to donate my sperm, they rejected me because I was too old. I tried to donate my hair and it turns out nobody wants gray hair. So here I was trying to do something to make myself feel good, and it was having the opposite effect. So anyway, I've also had these 12 learning resolutions to learn 12 new skills. And when I was done with unicycling, parkour, slacklining, jumping stilts, and drumming, my wife suggested I learn how to knit. And I'll be honest, I wasn't all that passionate about knitting. But one day I'm sitting under this 40-foot tall eucalyptus tree that's 2.6 miles up the Cold Spring Trail in Santa Barbara, and I'm thinking, that tree would look really cool if it were covered in yarn. And so I went home and I Googled this, and it turns out this is a thing people do. It's called yarn bombing. You wrap these public structures with yarn. And the second annual International Yarn Bombing Day was just 82 days away. So for the next 82 days, no matter where I was, if I was in a board meeting, on the trading floor, in an airplane, or in the hospital, I was knitting, one stitch at a time. And 82 days later, I had done my first ever yarn bomb. And the response to it blew me away. So I kept going with bigger, more ambitious projects that required more engineering skills. And in 2014, I set the goal to wrap 6 massive boulders in Los Padres National Forest at the top of the mountains. But if I was going to pull this off, I'd need help. So at this point, I had a few thousand followers on social media as the Yarn Bomber. And I started getting packages, lots of packages. 388 contributors from 36 countries in all 50 states. In the end, I didn't wrap one massive boulder. I wrapped 18. So I kept going with bigger, more ambitious projects that would require me to work with new materials like fiberglass, wood, and metals, which culminates in a project that is currently at TMC here in Tucson, where I wrap the Children's Hospital. Along the way, I stopped knitting. I never really liked it. But I like crocheting. So I started making these 7-inch granny squares because that's the standard granny square. And I thought along the way, why am I stopping at 7 inches? I need big stuff. So I started making bigger granny squares. One day I've come home from a business trip and I've got this really large granny. And I went to the website of Guinness. I was curious, what's the world's largest granny square? And it turns out there's no category for it. So I applied, and they rejected me. So I appealed, and they rejected me. I appealed again, and they said, fine. If you make it 10 meters by 10 meters, we'll create a new category, and you will be a Guinness.
Baik, kita lanjutkan. Di menit ke-13.09, dia menantang dirinya mempelajari 12 keahlian baru dalam setahun, salah satunya merajut. Di menit ke-13.54, dia mulai merajut satu demi satu jahitan dimanapun dia berada, saat rapat, di pesawat, bahkan di rumah sakit. Proyek rajutan jalanan atau yarn bombing miliknya membesar hingga melibatkan kolaborasi ratusan orang dari 36 negara untuk membungkus 18 batu raksasa di gunung. Di menit ke-15.36, dia kemudian beralih ke rajutan crochet atau renda berbentuk kotak granny square. Ketika tahu Guinness World Records belum punya kategori tersebut, dia mendaftar. Pihak Guinness menantangnya membuat ukuran 10 kali 10 meter. Lalu di menit ke-16.20, selama 2 tahun, 7 bulan, dan 17 hari dilakukan satu tusukan rajut demi satu tusukan, total lebih dari 1,5 juta tusukan, hingga akhirnya dia resmi menjadi pemegang rekor dunia Guinness untuk rajutan granny square terbesar di dunia. Saya lanjutkan kembali.
Guinness World Record holder. So, for the next 2 years, 7 months, 17 days, 1 stitch at a time, I finally reached more than 500,000 stitches, incorporated more than 30 miles of yarn, and I am now the official Guinness World Record holder for the largest crocheted granny square. Along the way, I've garnered an awful lot of attention for my escapades. I've been featured in Newsweek magazine, Art News, which is kind of the Bible for artists. But what I want you to realize when you hear these things, I'm still that C- student. I'm still that kid who can't settle down or focus for more than 5 or 10 minutes at a time. And I remain a guy who possesses no special gift of talent or skill. All I do is take really big, ambitious projects that people seem to marvel at, break them down to their simplest form, and then just make marginal improvements along the way to improve my odds of achieving them. And so the whole reason I'm giving this talk is I'm hoping to inspire several of you to pull some of those ambitious dreams that you have for yourself off the bookshelf and start pursuing them by making that marginal adjustment to your routine. Thank you.
Baik, di selanjutnya ini, di menit ke-16.47, dia membahas, meskipun dia mendapat banyak perhatian dari majalah berita dan seni terkemuka, Steven menegaskan, saya tetaplah murid bernilai C- itu. Saya tetap anak yang tidak bisa duduk tenang atau fokus lebih dari 5 atau 10 menit. Selanjutnya di menit 17.14, dia tidak punya bakat ajaib. Yang dia lakukan hanyalah mengambil proyek besar yang ambisius, memecahnya menjadi bentuk yang paling sederhana, lalu membuat perbaikan marginal atau kecil di sepanjang jalan untuk meningkatkan peluang sukses. Lalu di menit ke-17.27, dia menutup presentasi dengan mengajak penonton untuk mengambil kembali mimpi-mimpi besar mereka yang selama ini tersimpan di lemari itu. Atau bisa dibilang di lemari buku itu. Dan mulai mengejarnya dengan melakukan penyesuaian kecil pada rutinitas harian mereka. Bagian penutup ini mungkin menekankan aspek inklusivitas dari pesannya, pembicara ingin meyakinkan audiens bahwa siapapun, bahkan orang yang memiliki keterbatasan fokus seperti dirinya, bisa meraih rekor dunia atau mimpi tertinggi asalkan mau memecah tujuan besar tersebut menjadi aksi-aksi mikro harian yang konsisten. Lalu, pertama, saya akan membahas sebuah video yang berjudul What is a Coronavirus by Elizabeth Cox. Kita dengarkan dulu videonya. Saya akan mentranslate dari menit ke 00 sampai 01 sampai 100.
For almost a decade, scientists chased the source of a deadly new virus through China's tallest mountains and most isolated caverns. They finally found it here, in the bats of Shitao Cave. The virus in question was a coronavirus that caused an epidemic of severe acute respiratory syndrome, or SARS, in 2003. Coronaviruses are a group of viruses covered in little protein spikes that look like a crown, or corona in Latin. There are hundreds of known coronaviruses. 7 of them infect humans and can cause disease. The coronavirus SARS-CoV causes SARS, MERS-CoV causes MERS, and SARS-CoV-2 causes the disease COVID-19. Of the 7 human coronaviruses, 4 cause colds, mild, highly contagious infections of the nose and throat.
Baik. Di sini saya akan menerjemahkan. Pembukaan video memperkenalkan sebuah pertanyaan tentang apa itu coronavirus. Video dimulai dengan kisah ilmuwan yang dimana dia mencari sumber virus mematikan di gua-gua terpencil di Tiongkok yang menyebabkan SARS pada tahun 2003. Dijelaskan bahwa coronavirus adalah kelompok virus yang memiliki protein menyerupai mahkota atau corona. Ada ratusan jenis coronavirus dan 7 diantaranya menginfeksi manusia, termasuk yang menyebabkan SARS, MERS, dan COVID-19. Kita lanjutkan video berikutnya dari menit ke-1 sampai ke menit ke-2.
2 infect the lungs and cause much more severe illnesses. The 7th, which causes COVID-19, has features of each. It spreads easily, but can severely impact the lungs. When an infected person coughs, droplets containing the virus spray out. The virus can infect a new person when the droplets enter their nose or mouth. Coronaviruses transmit best in enclosed spaces where people are close together. Cold weather keeps their delicate casing from drying out, enabling the virus to survive for longer between hosts, while UV exposure from sunlight may damage it. These seasonal variations matter more for established viruses, but because no one is yet immune to a new virus, it has so many potential hosts that it doesn't need ideal conditions to spread. In the body, the protein spikes embed in the host cells and fuse with them, enabling the virus.
Baik, saya lanjutkan kembali. Di menit ke-1 sampai 2 menit ini, penyebaran dan di sini membahas soal penyebaran dan mekanisme infeksi. Bagian ini membahas bagaimana 4 jenis coronavirus menyebabkan flu ringan, sementara yang lain menyerang paru-paru. Virus ini menyebar melalui tetesan droplets dari orang yang terinfeksi. Virus cenderung bertahan lebih baik di ruang tertutup dan cuaca dingin. Dalam tubuh, protein virus menempel pada sel inang dan mengambil alih fungsinya untuk memperbanyak diri. Di menit selanjutnya, kita akan bahas lagi sampai ke menit 3:00.
Virus to hijack the host cell's machinery to replicate its own genes. Coronaviruses store their genes on RNA. All viruses are either RNA viruses or DNA viruses. RNA viruses tend to be smaller, with fewer genes, meaning they infect many hosts and replicate quickly in those hosts. In general, RNA viruses don't have a proofreading mechanism, whereas DNA viruses do. So when an RNA virus replicates, it's much more likely to have mistakes called mutations. Many of these mutations are useless or even harmful, but some make the virus better suited for certain environments, like a new host species. Epidemics often occur when a virus jumps from animals to humans. This is true of the RNA viruses that cause the Ebola, Zika, and SARS epidemics, and the COVID-19 pandemic. Once in humans, the virus still mutates, usually not enough to create a new virus.
Baik, selanjutnya di menit ini kita akan membahas tentang RNA dan mutasi virus. Dijelaskan bahwa coronavirus menyimpan gen mereka dalam RNA. Virus RNA cenderung cepat bermutasi karena tidak memiliki mekanisme koreksi kesalahan yang sempurna, yang memungkinkan mereka beradaptasi dengan inang baru. Inilah mengapa virus seperti Ebola, Zika, dan SARS seringkali melompat dari hewan ke manusia. Kita lanjutkan kembali.
But enough to create variations or strains of the original one. Coronaviruses have a few key differences from most RNA viruses.
Baik, di sini dijelaskan RNA dan mutasi virus menyimpan gen mereka dalam RNA. Virus RNA cenderung cepat bermutasi karena tidak memiliki mekanisme koreksi kesalahan yang sempurna. Seperti itu. Kita lanjutkan kembali di menit ke-3 menit sampai ke-4 menit.
They're some of the largest, meaning they have the most genes. That creates more opportunity for harmful mutations. To counteract this risk, coronaviruses have a unique feature, an enzyme that checks for replication errors and corrects mistakes. This makes coronaviruses much more stable, with a slower mutation rate than other RNA viruses. While this may sound formidable, the slow mutation rate is actually a promising sign when it comes to disarming them. After an infection, our immune systems can recognize germs and destroy them more quickly if they infect us again, so they don't make us sick. The mutations can make a virus less recognizable to our immune systems and therefore more difficult to fight off. They can also make antiviral drugs and vaccines less effective because they're tailored very specifically to a virus.
Baik, di sini di menit ke-4:00 membahas soal stabilitas coronavirus dan imunitas. Berbeda dengan virus RNA lainnya, coronavirus memiliki enzim unik yang berfungsi sebagai korektor untuk memperbaiki kesalahan replikasi. Hal ini membuat coronavirus lebih stabil dengan tingkat mutasi yang lebih lambat. Kecepatan mutasi yang lambat ini sebenarnya merupakan pertanda baik bagi aktivitas vaksin di masa depan. Kita lanjutkan kembali dari menit ke-4 sampai dengan menit 5:16 sampai terakhir.
That's why we need a new flu vaccine every year. The influenza virus mutates so quickly that new strains pop up constantly. The slower mutation rate of coronaviruses means our immune systems, drugs, and vaccines might be able to recognize them for longer after infection, and therefore protect us better. Still, we don't know how long our bodies remain immune to different coronaviruses. There's never been an approved treatment or vaccine for a coronavirus. We haven't focused on treating the ones that cause colds, and though scientists began developing treatments for SARS and MERS, the epidemics ended before those treatments completed clinical trials. As we continue to encroach on other animals' habitats, Some scientists say a new coronavirus jumping to humans is inevitable. But if we investigate these unknowns, it doesn't have to be devastating. Students and teachers all over the world did their part to help slow the spread of COVID-19 by staying home. But what about their graduation ceremonies? Learn more about TED's global campaign.
Baik, di sini pembahasan mulai tentang tantangan masa depan, di mana video ini ditutup dengan catatan bahwa belum ada pengobatan atau vaksin yang disetujui untuk coronavirus, meskipun penelitian pernah dilakukan untuk SARS dan MERS seiring dengan semakin terganggunya habitat hewan, resiko loncatan virus ke manusia dianggap tak terhindarkan. Namun, sains dapat membantu kita menghadapinya. Bagian akhir video diakhiri dengan pesan tentang inisiatif perayaan kelulusan global dari TED atau TED. Sekian dari, jadi di menit ke-40 sampai 5:16 ini membahas tentang tantangan masa depan. Video ini mencatat bahwa belum ada pengobatan atau vaksin yang disetujui untuk coronavirus, meskipun penelitian pernah dilakukan untuk SARS dan MERS. Seiring dengan semakin terganggunya habitat hewan, resiko loncatan virus ke manusia dianggap tak terhindarkan. Namun sains dapat membantu kita menghadapinya. Bagian akhir video ini diakhiri dengan pesan tentang inisiatif perayaan kelulusan global dari TED. Sekian dari saya tentang video What is a Coronavirus by Elizabeth Cox. Mohon maaf bila ada kesalahan atau kurang jelasnya. Mungkin itu yang bisa saya sampaikan di video ini. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. See you next time.
I just had to let you know you're